going to do a little bit of an introduction before we get to the channel introduction and let you know that this is going to be a very confronting video. I'm going to be talking about my rock bottom, what got me there and what kept me there, and ultimately what got me out. I'll give you fair warning, folks. After the usual channel introduction, please bear in mind that there will be a trigger warning in place, because some of what I'm about to tell you is going to be very upsetting and very confronting. But I'm hoping that in doing this video that it will help you to confront these things that hold us down, and maybe, just maybe, it might make your exit of your dark pit of despair just that little bit easier. So, here we are. Let's get to business. Everybody has a different rock bottom, and it affects people in varying degrees. In 1994, my father passed away. Now, that in itself was very confronting. When your first parent passes away, for me, that's when I started to get anxiety. It was very confronting because it called into question mortality, your own mortality, because up to a certain point in my life, you think you're invincible, and then you lose a parent, and life throws you that curveball where you go, oh, okay, so I'm not invincible. I got panic attacks, and that's where the depression began, the anxiety began. Mum and I dealt with it as best we could. It was a massive deal for both of us. Her inspiration for singing came from the fact that his opinion was everything to her, and he wasn't there anymore to give that feedback that she valued so highly. But we got through it. I spent a whole year at home, and I grieved with Mum, supported her, she supported me, we supported each other. And then it was time for me to go out and have a life. That was a tricky conversation for her to have with me, and we just went on our merry way. We did our thing, and we did what we did best. We dug our heels in and carried on. And then around about 99, beginning of 2000, we did actually make a promise to each other in that time when we were grieving that we would never have any secrets from each other. And I thought that that was clear. One day, I was in the lounge room with my mother, and for whatever reason, she got up to go to her bedroom to get something. And I was sitting there, and for whatever reason at the time, can't remember, I looked over to where she had been sitting. Now, I had noticed that she'd been putting a towel where she'd been sitting for a little bit. But this time when she got up, there was blood on the towel. And my heart sank because my mother had already gone through the change of life. And when she came back into the bedroom, I'm like, what's that? And she then proceeded to tell me that she had been bleeding off and on for a couple of months. I was a bit angry because I thought we had made it clear with each other that because we only had each other, that we would not have any secrets from each other. So we got a referral from the GP to go and see a gynecologist. And I remember sitting in the waiting room for the gynecologist, and I remember this fleeting thought, this is the beginning of the end. I remember thinking it really clearly. So they initially thought that it was fibroids inside the uterus. So back to the doctor, and they gave her injections once a month. They did a scan. It looked like fibroids, apparently. And what they did was they gave her injections for, I think it was 4 months, to reduce the size of the fibroids just to see what would happen. Did indeed reduce the size of the fibroids. Um, but then when she went to have the internal scan, the person who actually saw the scan, obviously said, yep, I'm not sure that these are fibroids, but, I'll put that in my report. The next thing we know is that she's up at Hornsby Hospital for day surgery to have a biopsy of what was in there. A few days after that, got a phone call from the gynecologist, said, I want you in the hospital like it was a matter of like 24 hours. You need an emergency hysterectomy because you have something in there that should not be in there. And we'll have to organize radiotherapy for you after the surgery. So basically, it was uterine cancer. She had the hysterectomy, and I remember very clearly when she was wheeled out of surgery, seeing my mother on that bed, out of it, obviously, because she was still under anesthetic, and wheeled past me. And I'm standing there outside ICU, and the nurse said, just give us a little moment. She's not out of the anesthetic yet, so you can come in and see her once we've got her all hooked up, as she said. So that took about 10, 15 minutes. I went in, and I have never seen so many bells, beeps, buzzers, and wires hooked up to one person in my entire life. And that was the first moment where I'm like, oh my God, I'm alone. There was nothing that I could do that night. So I went home to an empty house. That was a bit much. Won't lie to you there. So she goes through, weeks pass by, she goes through the process of radiotherapy. And towards the end of that radiotherapy, she started to decline. She was losing her energy. She just wasn't right. She wasn't feeling right. So she went for a CT scan, and I took her home. We waited a few days, and I went to the Seventh day Adventist hospital to get the results. And I read the results, and I knew that she wasn't going to be here for long. I remember standing there reading the report going, yeah, this is just not going to have optimal ending in terms of remaining alive. At the time, my now husband was actually living with us, and he was there when I got home, and he said, how did it go? And I went, not good. I had been to the gynecologist, and I discussed it with him. He said, look, we're probably looking at chemotherapy here. He said, but I'm wondering if it's not too late. He said, just let me speak to my colleagues and see what we can do. And I said, well, what do I do here? Because I'm about to go home with these results, My mother's going to want to read them. What do I say? Because the report is not great. And yeah, he said, just let me speak to my colleagues. And I said, okay, so what I'm hearing here is that I have to go home and lie to my mother so she doesn't worry. And he said, yep, we can't have her worrying right now. He said, but we need to not give her too much hope either. And I'm like, okay. How do you lie to a woman who gave birth to you and knows every expression, every twinkle in the eye, every emotion, and knows you backwards and forwards, sideways, up, down, whatever? I don't know how I did it, but I did. And it was vile. It was vile. So the next day, I believe, if memory serves, was Anzac Day. So everything was shut. That night, I think it was Anzac Day. Oh, forgive me. Time frames. It's been a long time. The next day, Mum said to me, Mywin, I think we need to organise an ambulance for me to go to the hospital. And I said, we are not getting an ambulance. I will take you. She said, no, Mywin, I'm in quite a bit of pain here. She said, it's going to take some big, burly, beefy guys to get me to the ambulance, and I don't want you doing that. So I said, all right, that's fine. I went to give her a kiss and a cuddle goodnight, and I couldn't get close enough because she was lying on her side. I couldn't get close enough to her. The pain was too much. Couldn't touch her, couldn't lean on her at all. So I said goodnight to her. I went to bed. And then the next morning I woke up at about, I would say about 10 o'clock. And I went in to the bedroom and usually, opened the door. You sort of opened the door and her bed was on the right as you walked in the door. And usually what would happen is I'd open the door and she'd turn around, morning dear. And, you know, she didn't do that. But she was snoring her head off. And I remember thinking I gingerly walked back out again. And I thought to myself, I'm not waking her up while she's sleeping so soundly, only to go to an uncomfortable hospital bed. When she wakes up, then we'll organize the ambulance. So I made myself a coffee, sat down in front of my computer, and did some sort of, I don't know, admin, if you like. I was working on some covers and stuff for Mum's CD collection at the time, privately released. And it must have been about 1 o'clock. Before I tell you the next bit of a story, a nice one. Her bedroom and my bedroom were separated by a wall. And usually when we went to bed, we'd knock on the wall to each other. And we'd go, and she'd respond with the same. Or I'd respond with the same. And then, so like she'd go, then I'd go, boom, boom, boom. Then she'd go, boom, boom. And rattle on the wall. And that was our little thing that we did as a good night. So, back to this moment in time of about 1 o'clock. I heard on the wall, ah, says I, she's awake. And then I looked up and there was like a flash of light on the end of the corridor that I was about to step into. It was like a, put it in the freaky column if you want, but this is what I saw, this is what I experienced. Flash of light, goes right down towards where Mum's bedroom would have been. I remember thinking, okay, that's odd. But anyway, I got up, went to her bedroom door, and I opened it that much. A couple of inches maybe. And I smelt something come from her bedroom that reminded me of a book that she read, written by Lauren Bacall, who was Humphrey Bogart's wife. And I remember Mum reading this passage to me years ago, and that particular moment reminded me of that particular passage. And the basically, Lauren Bacall did not go into Humphrey Bogart's bedroom for months after he died. But even so, when she finally did, she, because he passed away of cancer, she could still smell, as she put it, she was up front, she could still smell death. So there I am standing there thinking that with the door open that much. And I opened the door, looked in, I said, Mum, no response. Walked around to the foot of her bed. I said, Mum, no response. I walked all the way around where I went to kiss her goodnight the night before. Mummy, no response. I touched her shoulder and I was very aware of the fact that she was very cold. And I said, Mummy, no response. I felt her neck to see if I could find any kind of heartbeat on the jugular. There was nothing. I lifted her eyelid and it was fully dilated, like black. That was very jarring because she had the most beautiful blue eyes. And that blue had gone. And I stood there and I felt that cold rush of adrenaline go right through my body. You know that you go white with fear. I felt like the color draining from my body. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, I guess this is it then. I thought that I'd fall into a heap on the ground and, you know, that grand dramatic, oh my God. But no, didn't do that. I walked out of the room and I went into the bedroom that my now husband was sleeping in. I said, Ross, Mum's died. And he did a full exorcist sit up. He went, what? I said, Mum has died. She's dead. In her bed, she's dead. And he was like a stunned mullet. And I stood in the hallway, panicking, didn't know, scattered, completely scattered. And as for some reason, I pulled in sense and sensibility, I suppose, if you like, and said, okay, we need to call an ambulance to confirm the death. And that is exactly how I thought. I need to call an ambulance to confirm the death. And that is what I did. And the ambulance came, these two guys came, and they were great. They came in with their machines and everything. I stood there while they hooked her up to find a heartbeat. obviously, you know, there wasn't any. And he said, I'm so very, very sorry. But your mother has, you are correct, she has passed away. And he said, you're going to have to call your GP to come out here. So I did that. Found out because he hadn't actually, she'd been treated by the gynecologist. And because her GP hadn't been treating her for about a year, he couldn't come out to the house and do any kind of autopsy or whatever. So I had to call the police, and that sent me into an absolute tailspin panic. They came, and they were fantastic. They asked me to go and remove all her jewelry, and I couldn't do it because rigor mortis was setting in. So I couldn't do it. And the police officer said, "Do you give me permission to do that?" I said, "Yes, please do, because I can't. I just can't do it." And they made a call to Westmead coroners, and then I called. I got on the phone and I called Adrian. And he was living in, I think, close to Parramatta at the time. He got from there to my house in about 15 minutes. And, yeah. So he arrived. And the funny thing is, and I don't mean funny, haha, the funny thing is that a few weeks prior, Adrian actually had a job at the coroner's. And he actually threw in the towel, wouldn't do it, and had enough in a very short space of time. And it so happens that had he still been working there, he probably would have been one of the two that came to pick up my mother. Yeah, that's his story to tell. Um, so they told him to keep me out of the bedroom. And I remember Adrian telling me why. Because it is a small space and that they'll probably have to stand her up to get her onto the stretcher. And that could be very disturbing for me. No kidding. So eventually they rolled her out down the hallway. I've spent my whole life looking at this woman wearing the most glorious costumes and the most glorious gowns. To see her being wheeled down on a stretcher in a black bag. I knew that life would never be the same again. So I remember saying to my then boyfriend, now husband, said, "We are so out of this house. We are so out of here." I couldn't keep my mother's private CD collection going. I shut it down not long after she died because I had a level of quality control that for every CD that I burnt, I would listen to every single one of them to make sure that they were okay. And it became very clear very quickly that that was very difficult for me to do now that she was gone, to listen to her sing. Yeah, that was just not going to happen. So I eventually stopped listening to my mother sing completely. Can you see where this rock bottom's going? such a huge, huge part of my life, I shut it down. Music. Wouldn't listen to classical music. Wouldn't listen to opera. I definitely couldn't listen to other singers singing the stuff my mother used to sing. Couldn't do it. I shut it down. For over 20 years. And I spoke to Adrian last night, and it wasn't like I didn't give it a good go. I did try to move on. I really, really did try. I got married. I had 2 children. But as the years went by, I got deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into this rock bottom. It was like there was no bottom to it, no end. Like I said, I tried. Got married, had kids, lost 60 kilos even. But wasn't quite enough. Wasn't quite enough. And there I stayed for over 20 years. And then, while my eldest was at school, he was in year 6, a new kid started at the school. And his mother was wonderful. She was full of life, she was exuberant, she was fantastic. And she and I hit it off really quickly and really well. And phone calls, dinners, barbecues, messages on Facebook, SMSs, phone calls. We just got on so well. And then one day, I got an SMS from her. Basically, long and short, she dumped me as a friend. She dumped me. Prior to that, I was already in the garage, but not living in it. Um, that was the thing. From that point on, I refused to drive anywhere because I had to drive past her house to get out to the main road to go either to the school or to the shops. So I didn't drive anywhere, so my kids had to walk to school and walk home. And I just isolated myself because I got burnt. And that was, I had all of that stuff with mum. And what really, really cemented me into that garage was getting dumped in an SMS. And years later, at my son's graduation, I did go to my eldest son's high school graduation. I went, nearly bloody killed me physically, but I went. I went, and I'm glad I did. And there she was. She'd had lap band surgery. And there I am, on a walking stick, can barely move. And she'd had lap band surgery and lost it all. Lost all the weight. And I had to sit there and be happy for her while I sat there in misery, utter misery. Another great performance on my part, I might add. But it crushed me that somebody could dump me like that on an SMS and have such victory. And it's not like she had a lot to lose. It's not like some of us that
having to lose hundreds of pounds. But she got to that option before trying anything else. And that's fine. That's fine. But I had to sit there and be happy for her. And I was just dying inside. That finished me off. Just finished me off. I've wanted to tell her so many times how much she hurt me. And then you sort of like the moment you think about it, like, what's the point? They're not going to care. Why bother? You know? So eventually I stopped going up the stairs at home because I'd put on that much weight that I could get up the stairs, but coming down, I was scared that I was going to fall because if I fell down the stairs, that's it, I'd be dead. So I eventually slept in the garage as well. I only came out to go to the loo, have a shower, maybe make dinner, cup of coffee. Eventually everybody was doing stuff for me and I was just in the garage. And I stayed there. I stayed there. My husband had to come in there and sit with me to spend time with me in there. And one day, this was when COVID had hit, my husband, we were talking, he was worried about his job because they were going to be starting to lay people off, even though some of them had been working part time at home, part time in the office. And there was every indication that he was going to be let go. He said, because I was last in, so I'm bound to be first out. He said, I'm worried. I'm really worried, financially worried, da da da. I said, right, that's it, we're not doing this. And he said, what do you mean? I said, okay. My mother died and left me this house, our house down there. She left me this house. We've got a roof over our head. She always considered that important. Said if we have to sell up, try and make a profit to buy a home and move to Queensland to give you that grace period and eliminate that stress for you worrying where the next meal's coming from, then that's what we're going to do. He said, are you serious? I said, yep. You've been wanting to move up there for ages. Let's do it. Let's just go. Screw this. Let's just go. And he went, right. We're going to Queensland then. I said, yes, we are. And that's what got me out of the garage physically. That's what got me out of there physically. But even when I came up here and I was sitting outside here, mentally I was still there. I was still there. I thought things would be different for me up here. How I drove from Sydney to Brisbane, the size that I was, I will never know. I'd have to probably put that in the miracle column. It was so uncomfortable, but I did it. I did it. Bulldog determination. Bloody mindedness, my mother would call it. But anyway. So then in October 2 years ago, Adrian comes up here. And that was the turning point that changed everything because I may have said it once or twice, but I wouldn't have admitted it then. But I was basically sitting here. When he came up that time, I was basically sitting here waiting to die. I had no joy for myself. There was nothing. Yeah, but oh, you're married, you've got children. Not when you're in that pit. Very little, if anything, gives you any joy when you're down there, I can assure you. Nothing. And he gave me a talking to. He gave me a talking to. And I gave him a complete on a USB stick. I gave him everything that I had on CD of my mother's that she'd released in the private collection. I gave it to him. And then for whatever reason, I thought to myself, no, you know what? No. If anybody's going to start a YouTube channel for my mother and put up her recordings, it's going to be bloody me. And that's where the healing started. Up here and in here. Through many, many exposure therapy moments, I was able to listen to my mother sing again. The next hurdle was seeing video of her singing. I pushed through that. I can now watch her sing and hear her sing. It has not been easy, but I had to do all of that with my mother's side of stuff and remastering some recordings and, saving the collection of stuff that my father recorded of hers. I had to do that groundwork because it would not have led me mentally to carnivore or even being open to it. It just wouldn't have. It wouldn't have been a blip on my radar, simply put. There is probably an awful lot more that I could discuss about my rock bottom. An awful lot more. There is a lot to unpack here, and I'm hoping that in the coming months, weeks even, that I'm going to be able to have Adrian come along, be in a video with me, so that you can get his perspective of what he observed. Because he's been with me through the whole thing of the exposure therapy, the value of it. My husband has too. But Adrian, he's the one that sort of like kicked my ass out of it. And I would love to be able to have discussions with him about these things on a video. So, now that you know, to that wonderful subscriber who said, I tend not to watch your videos because you remind me of my mother. I get it. Believe me, I get it. Which is why I did this video for you, my love. I did it for everybody, but it was you that inspired me to do this video. I thank you for it because I know that doing this is going to help me, and I'm hoping it's going to help other people too. We are all in this together, folks. We are all in it together, up to our eyeballs in it. But please know that whatever given rock bottom you're in, I understand. I really do. Because that was mine. So, on that note, I want you to be kind to those around you. Don't take any crap, please. Protect your peace. And be kind to yourself. I love you guys.